I mean, personally, that happened to me. I didn't really have a college fund to lean back on. So fortunately, I got scholarships to go to school, but most people I'd say aren't so lucky, especially because I played sports and then I was pretty decent in school as well. So I got an academic and athletic scholarship to my first school, but a lot of people just aren't so lucky. I'd say majority of people in America, for whatever reason, they enjoy American football the most, and then basketball. I think also part of that is because they're high scoring sports, and people like points. People want to see the numbers go up, and compared to football, which is like a game could have 0 points, could be 0-0.
Could you see soccer becoming the first sport in some time in the future, or it's still gonna be almost impossible?
I don't think so. I think football and basketball, there's too much money invested into it, and it's just more of an American culture. It appeals more to the American culture, I think. Like I said, points, entertainment.
Welcome to my podcast, World to the Max. I'm with my friend Blake from the United States this time. So just a reminder, I'm doing this podcast to share cultures with everybody that I've met along my journey in the United States or in other places. So how are you, Blake?
I'm good, Max. I'm good. I appreciate you having me on here. Share my side from the US.
Of course. Just a little story. We've met in college together. We played in the same team, and we've spent quite a lot of time together. So that's why I decided to pick you for that. So today we're going to talk about first the United States, because it's so big and it has so many different states. So I'll narrow it down to the state of Georgia. That's where
Okay.
we've met. It's a very common thing for someone that lives in the United States to spend that money in a way for their kids. But in other countries, it's impossible to think they're throwing tens of thousands in education. We're not even talking about universities that are next level in terms of course, you have scholarships, you have help, but sending your kid to a prestigious university is going to cost you a lot of money.
Mhm.
So talk to me about this society where, in a way, money is guiding people, or it's a lot based on money.
Yeah, I'd say the money, circulates. Obviously, people who have money want more money. So you kind of pay for what you think that you're going to get. So obviously, the big schools, they cost a lot more, especially college. When you look at, the tuition fees that you have to look at, sometimes you have to pay for the class, the books, things that you didn't even think that you have to pay for. And that really adds up. Even at those smaller schools, you still might have to pay a good amount, or that you think is a smaller school, you still might have to pay a good amount. And I think I don't know, I couldn't say that's not fair, but I think that's just how the society is. And that's just what we're used to right now. Obviously, I think that's probably why, they have scholarships. I would say they're almost forced to have scholarships, because if they didn't, there's a lot of people who would just not be able to go to school and further their education. And I think that would be a problem for the society overall, because you might be missing out on some people who could really, help society. And just because they can't afford it, that they can't go to school. And I'm sure that still happens, but at least, they have scholarships and stuff to help some of those people get to the next level. I mean, personally, that happened to me. I didn't really have a college fund to lean back on. So fortunately, I got scholarships to go to school, but most people I'd say aren't so lucky, especially because I played sports and then I was pretty decent in school as well. So I got an academic and athletic scholarship to my first school. But a lot of people just aren't so lucky. I'd say majority of people. And so, that's just kind of how the society is. And I don't really know if it's going to really change. That's just what we're used to.
Yeah, exactly. For people that don't know about scholarship, the scholarship system, well, you get money to go to school because, for example, the school will cost you 20, 30,000. And well, for example, if you're good at football, the football team will invest in you in a way. They'll pay for your expenses, or they will cover a part of it. So that's why you're able to go to universities thanks to sports in a way. You also have different academic, music, and arts. You have a lot of different scholarships. They reward what you're good at, your talent.
Yeah.
Something that you really don't have in other countries. Are you aware of the? It's a very unique system in the world.
I did not know that.
Really?
Yeah. I thought scholarships were kind of normal. At least maybe not for like high school, but I thought scholarships were like normal for colleges. I thought like if you're good at something, they were just, I thought scholarships were normal. I did not know that.
Well, I would say almost everywhere. I know in Canada they have a similar system. Maybe in the UK as well. But in general, like in most European countries, I'm sure Southern African, Southern American, it's really not a thing. Like you well, of course, education is free in a way. You pay for it in taxes or things like this. But if you're from a lower class, you still have access to free education, free universities. And then if you want to go to the higher level, then of course you have to pay for it. It's probably private, but you won't get help from that. You probably have to pay for everything. It's because there is a separation between sports and
But yeah,
university.
okay.
So if you want to go to the sports routes, then you can find a team that will pay for you like a salary, but it's all maybe 1 or 2% of athletes that can have that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always a big decision for student out of high school. If they are good at a sport, it's difficult for them to. That's why so many internationals come to American universities to
Do both.
pursue their career. We're gonna switch topic a bit, talking about still mindsets in the United States, but I'm gonna talk about. So one thing that I noticed in the United States is their relationship with success and failure. So I'm gonna talk about sports because that's an environment we're familiar with. But in sports, of course, everybody wants to win in general, and you have pressure or you feel pressure in different regards. But I feel like, at least that's what I felt. You're gonna tell me if you agree, but I felt like failure wasn't this bad of a thing. It's really accepted in society to fail and fail again to succeed at the end.
So I don't really know how it is, in other countries, but I think here, we have things like participation awards, which is just for being a part of it. You get some kind of trophy. I don't know if that's normal in other places, but and then there's second, third, fourth, fifth place over here sometimes. I think it also depends on your culture as well. But I know I like to win. I prefer to win, and I see kind of the difference between success and failure. But I also think over here being in like the culture it is where entrepreneurship is such a big thing. If you're looking at it as failure and success, there's a higher chance that you get discouraged, especially for sports as well, because, let's say you're playing for like football. If you don't make a team continuously, over and over again, you're going to start feeling like a failure. And, that's also just not good for your mentality. So I think over here, that success versus failure mindset really makes a big difference how we view it as opposed to other places in terms of encouragement and continuing pursuing whatever your goal is. And so I think that's a better mentality in terms of it being black and white, as a success being good and then failure being bad. So I think I can definitely see that happening over here, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say that in other countries we I was gonna say we see failure differently and success differently, but I would say that sports system in a way like the NBA, the NFL, you don't have relegation, you don't have promotion. So I would say you have less pressure
Yeah.
to play your sports. Same with the universities. You play in a team, you don't have a lot of pressure in a way. If you lose or if you win, of course everybody wants to win, but
Mm.
it's not gonna have as big of an impact if you lose as in other countries. So that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Just try again next season over here. But yeah, I mean, I do like the relegation promotion system for whatever sports because it gives you more incentive to win because, there's money on the line, reputation, things like that if you don't do as well. But I think for some things it's good, some things it's bad. I think once you get into like the professional realm and, higher performing sports, I think there should be more consequences for underperforming. I can't agree with that. But things like, the business world or the working world, I don't think that's as necessary. But for sports, definitely, I can agree. I like the European mindset when it comes to that. I think it would bring up the level even more because, the better people will get better and then the worst person, get punished or the worst players get or the teams get punished for being not as good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I think the United States is slowly, at least in the MLS or in soccer. So that's gonna be it's gonna happen. I'm sure eventually soon. I think they're going to transition to that
It is,
system.
yeah. It should happen in a couple years.
Yeah. Even do you think in universities it will happen too?
No, I don't think so. I think the difference between it'd be a lot. It maybe eventually, but it would take a long time because that'd be more money because the schools would maybe have to fly farther places depending on who they have to be forced to play. And that's more money on the school, more money on the, sports budget. So I think for them, it's really a money thing a lot for, those sports. So I think for, college, if it happens, it'll be a long time in the future just because there's more things that are involved.
I agree. I think I don't see it happening soon in the universities. So now we're gonna narrow it down to the south a bit. But I want you to tell me what are things that are typical in the south of the United.
Compared to the north, or
Yeah, compared to the other regions of the United States.
the weather is, warmer for the most part, I'd say. Yeah, depending even from where you are in the north. It can be like a drastic difference, especially Florida. It's like hot 80-90% of the year. Georgia's a little bit different, but it's more, like you said, it's more relaxed, more chill down here. That also helps with sports as well because if the climate is warmer most of the time, people are going to be able to train more, and so they're going to get better. They're going to be better players, better teams. And so I think that's why a lot in, football, you always hear about Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Florida, teams like that, because they're able to train more. So they get better, they improve. People more likely want to live here because it's warmer. A lot of people don't like the cold. A lot of people don't mind it, but a lot of people are just like, they don't want to be cold, especially if they're, going to be outside all the time. So I think that makes a big difference. That's why sports is such a big thing down here for football or American football, football, basketball as well. Even though that's inside still, there's a lot of outdoor courts where, people get better just by training. So I think that sports really makes a big difference compared to from the South to the North in terms of overall population of how many people come from the South that are actually good.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually never thought about it, but all those big American football teams, Alabama, they are actually all based in the South. So
Mhm.
yeah, talk to me about the place of American football in society. Is it really the main sport, or would you say there are other sports that are in contest?
Basketball, I think, is in contest with them. Soccer might be fourth place. I think it's American football, basketball, and baseball. I think
In this
the
order.
hmm?
In this order.
Yeah, I would say so because I would say it's kind of like our sport or the American sport, and so people obviously want to back it and be behind it. And, Americans or true Americans will put their money behind it because they think they're more Americanized sports, and it's just something that people enjoy. Obviously, people enjoy different things, but in America, for whatever reason, they enjoy American football the most, and then basketball. I think also part of that is because they're high scoring sports, and people like points. People want to see the numbers go up, and compared to football, which is like, a game could have 0 points, could be 0-0 or 1-1. And so I
Yeah.
think that's also a culture thing. That's also like a culture thing to want more points. And there's also the entertainment factor. Like football games are 3 hours long, 2.5, 3 hours long. There's commercials. I guess if you're watching on TV, majority of people will watch on TV compared to being at the stadium, but there's commercials even at the game. There's concessions that you can get. But for football, like European football, there's just halftime. There's only one like break where you go
Hmm.
get stuff like that. But here for American football, it's really entertainment based. Basketball, there's quarters. There's more breaks for people to, relax and do things like that, timeouts and things like that. So there's just more stopping. So I think it's really entertainment based. So as big as, football could get over here, I don't think it can, trump American football and basketball just because of how entertainment is in sports or in American sports. And so it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it's a very good description, actually. I would say American sports, what I would call, yeah, American football, baseball, and basketball, they're they are based on entertainment. Even when you go to a stadium, I was lucky to go to Alabama. So for people that don't know, they have stadium as big as professional stadiums, but designated for students. So in a way, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you're a student, but it's also a huge community that follows you like you're a professional athletes in a way. So that's one thing we don't have, I don't think anywhere in the world
I
where
doubt
you,
it.
yeah, you can see students being almost idolized in
Yeah.
a way. Do you like that? Do you think it's a good thing to see students?
I don't think there's an issue with it. Uh, for a lot of students or student athletes, most student athletes, how the professional. Most people don't go professional, so for them to get a little taste of that, I think is always good. A lot of times, they have the NIL, which you get money. So for you to be able to get money that early from doing something that you like, even if you won't continue to do that and become a professional, I think it's good. I like having a fan club. That's always really nice. So you get a little taste of that. And it's hard to it's not you can't replicate that in other sectors like There's nothing like that in business. I mean, eventually, but you have to be at the top of the food chain to get something like that. It's also still not the same. Sports is just something really different that, for them to experience that, I think is irreplaceable. So I think it's good. I like that they're doing that. Young kids, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, it shows how big sport is in society. I also think it's a very good thing for more people to be able to taste that success in a way because you have a big fan base. One thing that correct me if I'm wrong, but I realized in a way that you have a bigger fan base in college sports than you have in professional sports. For example, you have, I would say more, I don't know, maybe if it's a college thing, everybody living in the same community, but I don't see the same atmospheres in professional stadiums. What do you think about that?
I'd say you're right about like the community for college. Everybody is together. Oh, they find something that they like and then they all kind of rally behind that. And then there's a whole culture and community behind it. But I think for professional, most of the time there might be adults watching that. Most of the time adults aren't living with other adults. They have their own lives. So they have to find time to watch the game and just more responsibilities that they have to take care of. But in college, especially, freshman, sophomore, most of the time there's or first and second year, there's less responsibilities. A lot of times those years are focused on entertainment. So if you have like a school with 20,000 people and you have maybe 6,000, freshmen or 10,000 sophomores, they're probably going to be friends. Let's go watch the game. And so, that compounds. And then you just end up having a whole bunch of people who support college sports and watch it as opposed to, if you have to ask if you're an adult professional, you have to ask your friend, they might have a family, they might not be able to go watch things like that. So there's just more responsibilities, I think, outside of college. And I would say, college age people are the people watching most college football games because there's such a large population of them. So I think that makes a big difference, just the sheer amount of people who are in college that will, watch college football games. And, once they start, then, their parents will get into it as well. And then, that even makes more people enjoy it and watch it and things like that. And there's also more teams as well compared to professional. Compared to how many college teams there are, there's like a handful of professional teams, like in the NFL or even basketball.
I mean, that was my point actually, because in Europe, professional teams are actually idolized. You have a huge fan base. If you're, I mean, in England, in France, it's maybe not as big, but Spain,
Mhm.
Italian teams, German teams, they have a huge fan base, even second divisions, third divisions. So tell me why we don't really have that in the United States, like big fan base.
It's it's split because you're fighting college against professional. So you can only have so many people like both of them over there. Or like in Europe, there's not really college teams that you can support. So you're forced kind of to support your local professional team, even if it's a small team. If you want to watch the best football around, you have to go watch your local professional team. It's
Yeah.
not really I'll go watch the college. Like you said, sport and school is split. So there's no both. You can't just go watch both. So you're kind of everybody's forced to watch professional sports or semi professional sports over there. But here, there's so many more options. And so that makes a big difference.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good explanation as well. Um, but yeah, if I had to sum it up, I would say sports is a huge part of society in the United States. I would argue it's in a way the best country in a way to enjoy your sports because there's not as much pressure. You still have a lot of enjoyment in the process of it,
Mhm.
and you can still be able to play in college, play professionally, or play in general. So sports is a big part of culture in the US.
Mhm.
So one way that we met, well, the way we met is playing football, what they call soccer in the United States. So everybody that I have on my podcast, I have a section talking about soccer or football, and I want to know how it is in this country. I want to have your opinion on the place of soccer in society first.
I'd say it's growing very fast because our personal league, MLS, the American League, we're getting a lot of players from Europe. And so that's bringing more people to watch it. So people who usually football or people who watch football or European football, they'll see these players, and then they'll see them come over here. And then that'll give them more of an incentive to watch the MLS as well and play different teams. And so I think it's growing because that's happening more and more. But yeah, I'd say overall it's growing. It might not get to, the way American football, baseball, and basketball are, but, it's still progressing. So I think that's good, especially for the younger generations. And younger and younger people, I think they're improving. More people go professional at a younger age here and now, which I think is we're a little bit behind compared to Europe, because I know in Europe a lot of time, 15, 16-year-olds have professional contracts already. But I think we're catching up a little bit over here, little by little, which I think is good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, living 5 years in the US, I could see already within 5 years the progression of the United States. Well, you could see that they're hosting the World Cup this year,
Mm.
so I'm sure it's gonna have a big impact on society uh, and soccer in general. Could you see soccer becoming the first sports in some time in the future, or it's still gonna be almost impossible?
I don't think so. I think football and basketball, there's too much money invested into it. And it's just a more of an American culture. It appeals more to the American culture, I think. Like I said, points, entertainment. And so I think it's just soccer just going to be, or European football is just going to be, I don't think it can
Yeah.
as big as it gets. Just culture, just because of the culture, really.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. I also wanna talk about the MLS because it's the main, it's the first professional league in the United States. So I know you've played in, well, in the professional academy in Atlanta.
Mhm.
So talk to me about first the academy process. How is it like in the United States? And then about the professional level.
So my academy, we had our first year in 2016, and that is a team that I got scouted for. So I was on the first team for this academy, Atlanta United. And so we had, I think, 14, 16s, and 18, so maybe three teams. And I was on the 16s at the time. And so we ended up winning the whole championship that year, which is that's not normal. That's not how it usually happens. But I think that shows the amount of talent that we have in Georgia also, that we were able to do that on our first year. After that, I don't really know. You might have one or two players, maybe one, who are being looked at, past that in terms of like professional, but it's not as in Europe. Like by the time somebody turns 16, you might have one or two, three, maybe four, at least being looked at the professional team, maybe training with the second team, things like that. But here it's not as common. And then we go to 18. We went to the 18s, or when I turned 18, I played with the 18s, and even there, they didn't really invite a lot of us to play with the second team, first team, things like that. Maybe some people, but very far and few in between, which I think is a little abnormal compared to Europe. Usually, I'm sure 18s, a lot of times they're professional already. They're with the second team, or minimum they're going back and forth between the 20s or something like that. But here is a little bit different. So I think it's harder also here to transition from, it might be the same in Europe, but to transition from that 18s or 23s to the first or the second team, because we have that college route. So a lot of people are like, go to college instead of trying to go straight to the second team or the first team. And I think that's a big thing. And a lot of MLS teams don't have or some MLS teams don't have a second team that you can try and go for, which also makes a big difference, because you have to be very, very good to go from the 18s, which is when academy ends, the 23s. When academy ends, to go straight to the first team, it's not really likely. So that makes it even a more difficult jump to do. And so that just rarely happens. So I think the transition from academy to professional is a lot more difficult. And it's not like, I know in other, like maybe England, maybe you're a good player for, Fulham or Manchester City's 18s, then you can end up going to, Grimsby Town or Middlesbrough in the third or fourth division as an 18-year-old, and you can play second or first team division there. We can't really do that here because we only have three professional divisions. So if you want to do that, if you're decent enough to play at 18, you'd probably have to just go semi-professional, or you just be like, okay, I'm not good enough to get to the first, second, or third division. Let me just go to college. And so I think it's pretty difficult, to stay, to transition from academy to professional over here,
All right.
even if you're good, because a lot of it is political. If the coach doesn't really like your playing style, then you could be good. You could be one of the best players in the team, but if that first or second team coach doesn't like you for whatever reason, then you're not going to go. But I think that's normal. That's sports in general. But I think over here it's even a little bit worse because there's less options for you.
Yes, it's a fair description. A lot of people, at least in Europe, see the United States as like an easier level, which it is. But if you compare it with professional teams, when you're talking about academies and stuff, it's still around the same level. It's just that I think the problem you have in the US is they're importing a lot of players from outside. So from other countries in the professional teams. So that means academy local players don't have so many spots available to join those professional teams.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, but yeah, like you said, at the academy level, I don't think the teams are very different in terms of ability because sometimes, we've had other European teams come over here and play the American academies, and there's not really a big difference. But I think if it happened at a professional level, as you can see, is the difference is a lot bigger, and I think there's a disconnect between the academy and the professional level over here in America as opposed to in Europe.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, as you said, people would think in Europe coming to the US and becoming professional is an easy route, and it isn't at all. It's as just as difficult because you have less offers, so of course you have less availability and you have less spots available. If
Yeah.
you had 4 or 5 leagues professional that pay well, then yeah, it would be much easier.
Mhm.
One thing that I agree with is the level of the MLS is miles off the level of other professional leagues in Europe. That's the main problem. But you have a lot of young kids that are great football players in the US, but they just don't have the spot or the availability in those professional teams. And then they end up going to college,
Yep.
which is still a very good level. Huh? It would also be good for academy players to have opportunities, more opportunities.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess you could say like a crutch. So you can go to college and there's going to be more distractions. It's harder for you to focus on your sport. And so unless your school is really focused on improving its football players, you're probably just going to, you're not going to improve at the same rate. And then it makes it even more difficult to become a professional as well. So it's kind of like, a lot of times it's you either, I mean, we do have the draft, but that's still, only maybe 100 something players, which is just not too many compared to all the leagues that you have in Europe that you can go and try out for. But yeah, that college route kind of caused a lot of people to, miss out on their chance to become a professional. They might regress, they might get worse because there's a lot more distractions. You have to do school, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, being raised in Europe, I can see that you have to make a decision, whereas keeping your options open distracts you in a
Mhm.
way. When you have more options, you go towards one, you go towards the other, but you're not fully focused on one thing.
Yeah.
It's becoming a thing in society where we want to play it safe in a way, where we think at least I keep my options open, but at the end, what's better? It's a big debate between being the best version of yourself in one thing or being good in both. So it's difficult, but
Yeah.
it's also difficult to make a living playing professionally in the US soccer.
Yes.
So talk to me about those players, second divisions, sometimes even MLS players that don't make a lot of money.
Yeah, they're working on that right now to have a minimum salary, but I know our third division, a lot of times those people have to have second jobs. And, especially if you have a family, they have to have second jobs because there's other people they're taking care of. It's good for an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, maybe 20, even up to 20, 22, because, a lot of times teams will um, support you with housing and food sometimes, but still, it's hard to live off of, somebody I know, they were getting maybe $1,000 a month in that third division. It's hard to live off of that as a 22, 23-year old, especially, let alone you have like, or you're in a relationship or if you have a family, like that's
Mm.
impossible. So a lot of times those people will have to have second jobs, even in the USL Championship. Sometimes I know a while ago the minimum was like 20, 30,000. That's pretty. I mean, that's not bad if you're getting your house and your food paid for. But sometimes people just want to make more money, and so a lot of times you might want to have to, or you might have to get a second job if you want to live the way you want to live. So a lot of times it comes less about the dream and more about realistic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, last thing I want to talk about is, of course, Messi. So you're lucky enough to have arguably, I would say, the second best player ever, or if you want to call it the best player ever in
Yeah, I
your
should.
country.
I'll call that. I'll call it that. Yes.
No, well, some people would say the best player ever to play the game in Inter Miami. So talk to me about this. Have you been lucky enough to go watch one of his game, or what do you see the what kind of impact does it have on?
I
Soccer.
did get to watch him last year, and it was wonderful. It's way different than watching it on TV, and I was really far away, but it's still it's really really different. And you get to see like the best player ever, get to play against. Obviously it's not the best competition, but then you really get to see because that's our highest league. These are supposed to be the best players in our country or in the country, and you get to see I guess the difference, which is really, eye opening to obviously he's the best player ever, but it kind of shows you the levels between, what he's doing and what the best players in the country are doing as well. And, I think it really did help American soccer, I'd say. It brought more people, and Florida is really a really big football state already, but having the best player in the world come to your state is definitely helped the MLS overall because, he came here. So it kind of gives even bigger green light for other professionals to come here, like Heung-min Son, Timo Werner. A lot more people are coming here now too because of him. And then, even his own teammates like Busquets came, DePaul, Suarez. So that even helped, bolster that. They're going to bring in more money as well, which really helps for their team as well, and even teams that they play against because those people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to go to the game because I get to see Messi play. And so I think that was really, really good for the MLS in terms of how big it can get and also just the money behind it as well.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, obviously, Messi doesn't have so many years in front of him, so
Mhm.
hopefully, he can bring in another quality player or in general. But what?
Who do you think is better than Messi?
Well, of course, if you think he's the second best, of course, Ronaldo is the first.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you thought that. That's okay though.
Well, if I'm talking about career-wise, I would rate Messi to be higher because he's still able and he's playing style as well. But if you compare the two careers, it's a big debate. I can hear both sides. So, well, thank you, Blake. That was perfect. You talked about a lot of different things: sports, culture, food, so many different things. So I hope you enjoyed it because I did. So thank you very much, my man.
Thank you.
For everybody that wants to watch the podcast, it's available on YouTube, also on social media. And if you have anything that you agreed or disagreed, you can always comment below. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be the same for every episode. So stay tuned for another episode of World to the Max.
All right. Sounds good. I appreciate it.